Wait. Before we start, just want to make sure we're clear here. While this podcast talks about sobriety, mental health, and addiction, it is not meant to replace professional medical advice. Welcome to Sisters in Sobriety.
I'm Kathleen.
And I'm Sonia.
And we're ex-sisters-in-law, brought together in marriage and bonded through our sobriety journey.
Join us as we talk sobriety, addiction, and everything in between. You're in for quite a ride. And our Substack is buzzing with amazing content, from creative mocktail recipes to insightful courses and reflective exercises. There is something for everyone. Don't miss out. It's a great way to add some extra joy and depth to your journey. Check it out. Welcome to Sisters in Sobriety. Today we are joined by Jess Miller, the host of Mind Your Boundaries podcast on YouTube and an advocate for setting healthy boundaries.
She frequently explores how resentment, guilt, emotional immaturity, and toxic relationships all intersect to impact relapse.
So today we're going to talk about how boundaries can be protective in recovery and how emotional maturity plays a role in sustaining lasting change. Welcome, Jess.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very honored to be here.
We are so excited you're here. So can you share a little bit about your background and what led you to this work?
So I have a clinical practice for nearly 15 years, and I've just been noticing ever since the pandemic, we have an influx in need and not enough providers. So I wanted to start a podcast around something that I talk with my clients on like a daily basis, which are boundaries. And then I ended up just kind of specializing in a niche where we talk about family dynamics and boundaries.
Why boundaries? I mean, I'm also a clinician. I'm a couples therapist. So I know the boundaries are very, very important in relationships and in health. But for you, why was it boundaries that you were like, no, I've got to do a podcast on this?
Well, it's something I talk about probably with every single client, because I mean, we need boundaries around what we consume, put in our body, look on the internet, like how much we're on our phone, but relationships too, like how much we allow people to take our energy, how much we allow people to just dump on us. Like it's literally everywhere you look or every time you walk throughout your day, your boundaries. Plus, I spent the majority of my life not having boundaries and just thinking I was too nice. Like I felt too empathetic and I thought, oh, I just must feel too much. That's why my friends can set boundaries, but I can't. And so I struggled up until my 30s, I struggled with boundaries until I finally had to figure it out. Also, we had an unfortunate estrangement with my husband's parents because we didn't understand boundaries. And so just educating ourselves, realizing what they actually were, that's kind of what got me obsessed with them.
Sonia is an expert on estrangement.
Yeah, we both are, right?
So we both are.
I'm estranged from my
Experience.
family. Kathleen is my ex-sister-in-law, and she too is estranged from my family.
Ex-sister-in-law here.
So you talked a little bit about estrangement. Did that really shape how you teach people and talk about boundaries?
Yeah, because when I look back now, because when we went into it and then during it, we had no idea that we weren't actually setting boundaries leading up to the estrangement. We were just out a lot of hopeful requests and just like wishing they would see us as parents. And had all those like paper cuts along the way. And all of a sudden it was just like that one final thing that broke the camel's back and led us into an estrangement. And it wasn't until we realized they're never going to come back around and give us what we need. Like they're not going to change. And yet for us, the estrangement was too painful. And like my husband was suffering so much. Our kids miss their grandparents. And so for us, we had to figure out, okay, what are boundaries? How can we be in this system in a healthy way for us? And that's kind of what just started our work and just binging content and reading books and trying to figure it out.
So can I ask, did you figure it out?
I think for us, we did. Mainly our biggest like frustrations and all the paper cuts kept adding up around parenting. Like we just were not seen as parents. And on our way to our final talk, I was hopeful that we would reconcile, but I was also quietly really nervous because in that 2 years, we really got to have just like our children the way that we wanted without interference. And we were parenting
Mm.
the way we wanted, and we didn't feel like we just had such interference. And I asked Ryan, my husband, what are we going to do if this goes well in terms of, I don't want our kids to backtrack. And because we were having a lot of behavioral issues with our son. And he just said, I'm thinking about the same thing. And really, it's about limiting access. And that was kind of like our go to, like when we first started. Reconciling, it was really slow. And we reunited in a very methodical way. Like just we were very conscious about it.
Hmm. I think that's really, I really like what you said about that, how it was intentional, how you thought through it. You thought through what boundaries did need to be in place in order for you to have a relationship in that way.
Mhm.
I think that's, yeah.
I can't
Yeah.
imagine, Kathleen, if you had tried, or my other sister-in-law had tried to limit access. I can't even imagine what it would have ended up where it is now, I feel like, anyways, don't you?
Yeah, it's interesting because like I think that I'm totally going off track of the questions, but I think you can set boundaries, right? But Jess, you're the expert on boundaries. If you set boundaries and another person doesn't respect them, which is what would have happened in my case, the boundaries wouldn't have been respected, like limiting access, it wouldn't have been respected. So then you have to go back to the drawing board and reset boundaries or what? Or you don't have them in your life anymore.
Right. Well, do you have like an example of a way that they wouldn't have respected it? Like
I
if we
do.
have
So
okay.
Sonia does. She's
They're
the
my
expert
yeah,
on
they're
her
my
plant.
parents, but, like, okay, so it was my niece's first birthday party,
Mhm.
and Kathleen's grandmother was coming from Quebec and it's, like, 8 hours away from Toronto for the birthday, and Kathleen said something very lightly to my mom, like, "Oh, my grandma's gonna really wanna hold the baby because she hasn't seen her before," and my mom flipped out. She called me and was like, "This white lady told me that I can't hold my own grandkid." And Kathleen I think you were almost just trying to make conversation. I wasn't there, so I don't know
Oh, no,
what
I was joking about it. I was like, "Just so you know, she might not let go of her. She's obsessed with her." This is my, like, 90-year-old grandmother.
my parents
And
didn't
yeah.
go to that birthday. I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
They did not go to that birthday because of that comment.
Oh
And we
wow.
didn't
Well,
talk to them they didn't talk to us for 2 years after that.
they didn't talk to you for 2 years
Mhm.
because you just jokingly said your grandma wouldn't let go of your not let go of your baby. Boom.
Yeah, because I think the story they told themselves about that was that I actually what she said, Sonia's mother said to me is that I have no right to tell her how I interact with her grandchild.
How she
Oh
interacts with her.
wow.
How like yeah,
Boom.
and then they didn't speak to us for 2 years
Oh
after
my
that.
gosh.
Try having them as parents.
So that's the example of, like, I could have set boundaries, but I don't think they would have it's
I
hard to
actually
say.
think that was you trying to set a loose boundary in a joking way. I've tried that with them too, which is trying to like, let's make a joke about a boundary and see what the
So, actually, that's a question for you, Jessica. Is it better to be more direct about a boundary, or are there subtle ways you can inform people of your own boundaries?
Well, it depends on how they're handling it. Like for even just that circumstance, it seems like anything you say, they're going to catch it and try to make it a big deal or make it about themselves. And what I loved about
Yes.
boundaries, because I, for myself, identify as a very sensitive peacekeeper. And I think that's why I struggled with
Yeah.
it for so long because I felt like I was being selfish or mean and I couldn't say it in a way that didn't hurt somebody. And I just didn't want to hurt
Right.
somebody. But when I realized that a boundary is just a personal action you take to protect your limit, and you don't really have to involve the other person if you don't want to. Like
Yeah.
if they won't take it well and it will cause drama, you can just quietly keep holding your baby. Like a lot of people don't like it when, like modern wisdom now, we know not to kiss babies. But back in the day, everyone kissed babies, right? Well, at
Mhm.
least for my family, like when you would meet a newborn baby, you'd just, oh my gosh. And then you would be holding the baby and you would smell the baby and you would just see people like relatives just giving the baby kisses on the forehead or whatever. And now with germs and stuff and what we know with medicine, you're not supposed to do that. And so some moms will just choose to hold their baby, the newborn, the entire interaction rather than pass the baby around. And that is her minding the boundary versus having to tell everybody, please stop kissing the baby, because she can't actually control that, because they'll actually kiss the baby before she can even intercept.
Yes, I've heard that. I've heard that directly from clients that they will do that. They will hold that boundary, like just keep holding the baby so no one
Mhm.
kisses the
I'm
baby.
just okay. I know we've moved to like we're gonna talk about boundaries and toxic influences, but there is a cultural thing here too. If you try to do that with my parents, like, and if you told them, oh, there's like a germ issue or whatever, like they would not they would not believe you. They would not accept it because culturally,
That's an interesting point culturally, because like I can think of when I had my daughter, I didn't want anyone at the hospital.
hell no.
I set a boundary for myself with my own mother, but also with Sonia's parents, and that did also not go over well. So, but
Mhm.
culturally, Sonia, I think either you or your brother explained to me like there's like crowds of people in the room usually like when someone's having a baby, and that was not for me going to happen.
I
So
mean,
Mhm.
culturally, I didn't really understand that at the time.
my brother and I are like one generation removed from people giving birth in a village, right? With like
Mhm.
100 people.
Wow.
Sorry, let's just move on from our therapy conversation here, Kathleen.
This happens sometimes, Jess. We're gonna get back
No,
on
that
track.
I love
Makes it
that. I'm
interesting,
totally
right?
here for it. I'm here for it. I think
Sorry,
the
we're
big
working through some
I
family stuff. Go
yeah,
ahead.
but I think even for that, the biggest thing you have to remember is no matter how somebody responds to your boundary, like that's on them and their maturity level, their belief system, their, cultural basis, that's on them. You still get to have that boundary. So
Mhm.
even if somebody is upset because you made a joking comment about your grandma, like that's on them. Like you did nothing wrong, and just reminding yourself like, "Oh my gosh, I was just making a joke about my 90-year-old grandma. I did nothing wrong there." Like that's on them that they
Mhm.
couldn't handle it.
Mhm. I think that's a really good reminder. I think our listeners will take that to heart too, because I'm sure every single person has come across like that they've either tried to set a boundary, and let's be honest, not all people like it when you try to set a boundary, but that
Mhm.
how they respond to that is on them, not on you.
Right. And it's also very telling. Like if they respond very, very poorly, then that might be your first time you're identifying the takers in your life. Like it's a very important thing that you
Hmm.
pay attention to.
What distinguishes a healthy boundary from a punitive one? Like you're punishing someone.
Well, I think anything healthy that's protecting your resources, your time, your energy, like anything like that's a healthy boundary, but also anything that protects the relationship. If you feel like I
Mm.
am starting to resent this person because they are texting me nonstop, trauma dumping on me, like I don't have any time in my day, well, now your relationship is starting to get impacted because every time they ping you or you get a notification on your phone, you're annoyed. You're like feeling heavy. You want to avoid them. So if you set a boundary, you reduce the resentment that's bleeding in. And so that's also a way that you set healthy boundaries. It's to protect the relationship.
I like that viewing of it, like that you're also setting a boundary to protect the relationship. It's not just about you, which it can be, and that's fine, and that's enough to set a boundary, but that it's also about protecting the relationship. I think that's really important.
Hmm. That's the
So,
main thing that brought me into it.
Oh,
okay.
interesting, really?
Mhm.
Because if you're a peacemaker, and like you said, you're a peacemaker, like you were able to buy into it because you could see, okay, well, it's actually doing something for the relationship.
Yep. That's exactly what
Huh.
it is.
Huh. So just if since we are sisters in sobriety, obviously we're talking about my parents, like when I got sober, I realized that I didn't have boundaries and that I was letting things kind of go because I was usually drunk during our interactions. So, how do you know when a relationship is like potentially like toxic to you and could lead to a relapse?
I think you have to tune into yourself. Like you have to, really go inward and just be like, how do I feel when I'm with this person? How do I feel after I'm with them? Like, do they drain me? Do they fill me up? it might not be all the time like you have to cut them out completely, but it might be you have to shorten the interactions, because if you're with them for hours, then it becomes like you're so drained and depleted that you're more susceptible to doing things you wouldn't after the interaction. Like, so you really have to start listening, to your body. Like, how do you feel with that person?
I think that's a really good indication. Like, I have a 24-hour rule with my mother, bless her, but I can't. Like, it's just the stress of it. And I used to get
Oh,
hives if I spent more than, like, I remember 3 days, and I just started getting, like, I have eczema from stress sometimes, and I just would start to get it all over my face, and I'd be like, "Well, that's way
mm,
past my boundary."
your body was telling you the limit.
Yeah, my
Yeah.
body, I mean, the body doesn't lie, right?
Mhm.
So, just what are the phases of recovery where boundary setting becomes more crucial? Because I don't know if I would have been, able to do it in my first like 3 months of like recovery.
Mhm.
So with recovery, I would lean on you guys more, but I would imagine in the beginning your boundaries would have to be pretty solid because you need way more
Mhm.
support to get you off the ground.
Yeah, I think that there's a period where it's like your sobriety is so um fragile that it's like you don't wanna you're not trying to do all the things at once, Like, "Let's fix this relationship, and let's set boundaries, and let's do this." It's like, I think there's a period of time where it's like you just are trying not to drink.
Don't you have to set really strong boundaries in order to do that?
You can just ignore it for, like, the first you like, you know what I mean? Like, you're like, "I'm not gonna have this I don't think I'm ready to have this conversation now, so I'm just gonna, like, push it off, essentially." But I understand, yeah, for me, that would cause it causes anxiety, but
But,
sometimes
like, you wouldn't, maybe you don't have to have a conversation though in recovery, like, maybe it's, like, in right at the start. So, like, let's say what Jess was saying too is sometimes you just will hold your boundary without saying anything, like, she
yeah.
gave the example of the mother, right, holding the baby. So maybe it's like your friends ask you to go to a bar, you're in your early days of recovery, you just say, "Hey, I'm staying home, like, or doing something else tonight, or I have plans," like, whatever, like, that's you holding a boundary.
Yeah, that's true.
So Jess, how can someone prepare mentally and emotionally to to enforce a boundary or to set a boundary? I'd like, maybe enforce seems really hard, but like to set a boundary.
Yeah. So going back to just even in the beginning when you were saying like I'm not even like in the beginning you're just trying not to drink, that's where all my strength is going. Like that
Mhm.
is you're already setting all your limits and boundaries there. You're saying I
Mhm.
can't right now have a deep conversation where somebody might give me pushback. So right now my focus is going to be just getting through today. Like I'm not going to go into deep conversations because that's my limit right now. And as soon as I get more comfortable in my sobriety and in my recovery plan, then maybe I'll venture into that and it expands. But it sounds like in the beginning your boundary is very, very tight and just close to you. Like you're just protecting as much energy as you possibly can. That is actually a boundary. That's not avoidance. It's your limit.
Uh-huh. Okay.
So it's based
That's
on your
interesting.
capacity.
So, with your situation, just with your in laws, I know this sounds pretty self explanatory, but what is the difference between a temporary removal versus a permanent cutoff? Like, did you know that yours was temporary when you got into it?
Yeah, we thought it was going to be a 2-week break because
Ah,
what
Wow.
yeah. So it was simply something to do with a parenting decision we made around our child, and it was a lesson we were gonna try to teach him. It was through the holidays, so we let our family know, X happened, we're gonna enforce this, we need everyone's support, and my family obviously felt so bad for us and supported us right away, and then his family completely was just like, "Absolutely not, we won't do that, you can't do this to us, we're gonna do what we want," and they were gonna completely bulldoze our parenting, and so my husband's just like, "Okay, this is really sad that you're doing this, I'm, very unfortunate." So then he tried to explain it again, they still came back with, "Absolutely not." So then he said, "We'll just talk after the holidays." So that was a 2-week thing, we thought we were just doing a 2-week thing, and my husband, based on the way that they pushed and said, like, we're going to basically disrespect you 100%. And this was the first time he held a boundary, like he held the line and he didn't allow them to get their way. They were just like very bullish. So he was expecting an apology. And so what dragged it on for 2 years was us waiting for acknowledgement and an apology after, he had poured all of his emotions out on emails and talked to his mom, trying to communicate, like, this is what you guys have been doing to us for years. And this is how it made us feel when you did this at Christmas. Still nothing. And then it wasn't until, like 2 years later where I'm like, we're never going to get this apology. Like his parents were deteriorating. It wasn't good for them as either, but they also were not in a place to give us, like, take accountability and give us an apology. So we had to learn how to heal without their apology.
Mm-hmm.
So for us, we didn't know we were going to go into an estrangement at all. We didn't want that. We just needed a break and wanting that apology and just some respect. That's what drug it on.
So, wow, that's painful. I mean, that's really painful. And I also hear what you're saying about waiting for the apology, right? Like I hear that a lot in my clinical work when there's family estrangement or some sort of issue with like a sister or parents that they're like, well, I'm waiting for the apology. I can't I can't have closure without the apology. But so what you said was really interesting about like we had to learn how to heal without that. I wanted to come back to the question that I asked about how can you prepare? Like, how does someone prepare mentally and emotionally to enforce a boundary? And I know it must really depend on the type of person you are. I'm sure boundaries come more easily to some people and not, but how can you prepare for that?
Well, I think before you even set a boundary, you have to decide what is my action that I'm going to take to mind this limit. Because you have to basically prepare that whoever you're telling this boundary to, they don't have to respect it. And so it comes back on you to mind that line. So before you even have the conversation, you know what your action is to mind it. So even like your conversation about the friends asking you to go to the bar, if you were if you had the capacity to say, this is where I'm at right now, I'm not able to go to the bar, you would just say, thank you so much for thinking about me and including me tonight. I'm actually not drinking right now, but I would love to go for a walk or hike sometime. That way we can still hang out, stay connected and stay friends, but you don't have to worry about me relapsing. So you already know so your line is, I'm not going to the bar. And so even if they push, you already know, like, well, I'm not stepping foot in there. So like, oh, come on. It's just like one drink, or this is what we do. Like hiking, we don't even get up before 2. Like, why would we go hiking? Like you're just like, yeah, that's just not what I'm going to do. But I really do want to hang out with you. So if you ever want to do anything where alcohol is not involved, give me a call. Like our relationship matters. So really enforcing it is super easy once you already know what your behavioral change is going to be, should they not listen. Even you're thinking about parenting, if you're like my father-in-law eats like Buddy the Elf. So he is sugar all the time. And our son, it never worked out for him at all. Like he would get sick. Every single time he'd come home after spending an extended period of time with him, he would get sick. Before we didn't know what a boundary was, but this is what I wish we would have done to stop it. Because we would have all these conversations. We'd be so frustrated. One time my husband even called him or them in the middle of the night so they could hear him screaming because he was so sick with pain. And he was like, this is what it does to him. Like, stop feeding him so much crap. And it just never got through to him. But I wish this is what a boundary would have been. Like, we're not going to feed our kid so much crap. And if they couldn't respect that, all visits turn to family visits. So then we're there to monitor it. Like, we're there to see what our kid is eating. It's very easy, but we didn't know what it was. We thought a boundary was what we were doing, but really it was just a request.
I love that. I love that. It's like it's a request, but then you're saying, okay, all visits would turn to family visits if that boundary wasn't met. So you knew, okay, like, well, this is what you said you would do. Again, if you did it again, is like, okay, this is it. I'm not having my child be fed junk. So that's where the boundary is.
Yep. What is lovely for me, how I communicate boundaries, is I don't have to say, if you don't stop this, this is going to happen. in most cases.
Mhm.
Sometimes you have to say it if it's like a danger to your kid or if it's really like it's a significant thing. But in a lot of cases, you can just say, like, this is my boundary. And you can wrap it. Like, I like to sandwich it between attachment based language in the beginning. Like, the relationship really matters. You're so important to me. State your limit and then state the benefit. Like, this is how it will benefit you. And then if it's not followed, if they can't respect it for any reason or like whatever reason, emotional immaturity, they just don't see it, whatever, then you enforce your limit on your own. You just change your behavior. And if they ever ask you, well, why can't we spend time with our grandson alone now? Oh, yeah, it was just because the sugar was just really upsetting his stomach and we couldn't get on the same page. So now we're just hanging out as a family. So it doesn't have to be
Mm.
confrontational, which I really like because like that's what kept me stuck for so many years and I couldn't set boundaries because I felt like I had to say,
Mhm.
if you don't stop this, it's almost sounded like an ultimatum to me all the time. And
Yes.
the way that I communicate them, it does not sound like that to me. And that's how I was able to start setting boundaries.
Wow. So in your case, right, there was a pretty immediate benefit, right? Like you set that boundary and all of a sudden, like your son's stomach is not getting upset. But what
Yeah.
typically, what do you see as long-term benefits when people set boundaries, especially in the relationship?
Resentment is gone. Like that's like poison
Mhm.
to the relationship. I mean, that's the biggest thing is when you don't set boundaries. And that's what I was noticing is I was starting to resent people that were so special to me because they were just taking from me freely and I had no limits. And that's when I'm like, okay, I have to figure this out because I'm even resenting my mom, who is just like this sweet widow who, just has ADHD and calls and texts me all throughout my workday. Can't remember to not do it. Like, like I was starting to resent even her because I didn't even know how to set a limit with her. And as soon as you start setting your boundaries, you'll realize, like, oh my gosh, like I feel peace. I feel good about the relationships. I feel good about the people that I am in relationship with. I'm not upset with them for continuously taking from me freely.
I hear you about resentment. Like that is such an important long-term benefit of setting boundaries. What would you say to someone who's like, yeah, but I also feel short-term guilt. Like I feel guilt when I set a
Mhm.
boundary.
Oh, guilt is the most common thing. I think at least 70% of people don't set boundaries because of the guilt. And that
Mhm.
was the other thing I had to do a deep dive in because so if I even thought about setting a boundary with my mom, I would get
Mhm.
sick physically for like days. Like even thinking about telling her, okay, she can't come to my husband's side of the family for Mother's Day again and she has other children in the area. Like even just thinking about saying that, I would just be so sick. And it wasn't until
Yeah.
I don't know where I found out, but I've discovered there's two types of guilt. And I learned that there's healthy guilt and that keeps us aligned with our values, makes us a good person. It
Mhm.
really just checks in with us like, I didn't really like how you did that. Like, you can do better next time. So it keeps us being a good person. And then there's conditioned guilt. And that is kind of like classical conditioning with Pavlov's dog. That's how I see
Yes.
that. That has been wired into us, typically by our parents because they had a tool to get us to do something to meet their needs, which was to make us feel guilty. So it feels like guilt, but it's actually old wiring. And as soon as I started realizing that and identifying it, that awareness started like breaking it free. And I started like using tools to push through that guilt.
So just how is guilt over boundary setting sometimes more bearable, like in the long run, right? Like, so why am I willing to just feel that resentment so I don't have to feel that guilt?
So once I was able to pull apart like healthy guilt versus conditioned guilt and then use my tools to push through it, I found that guilt is temporary, that feeling of just discomfort, like, oh, I disappointed them, or I wonder what they're going to do now, or I wonder what they're thinking about me. Like that is very fleeting, and you can work through that in a matter of minutes. But resentment, that actually erodes the relationship. That will break down the best relationships, and that's long term. So I always say, like, pick guilt every single time because resentments that will actually I mean, it can wreck the best relationships.
I was actually just going to ask you, how can you reframe guilt so it doesn't like tip into self-sabotage? But I think you just maybe did. Like, if you don't do it, then the resentment will erode the relationship. So
Hmm.
you can reframe guilt in a sense. Like, if you know, okay, there's healthy guilt and then there's unhealthy guilt. Like, what kind of guilt is it?
Hmm.
And this allow you, by setting this boundary, does this allow you to maintain the relationship, if or not, but let go of resentment? Is that how you would
Hmm.
reframe it?
And then I always go back to my why. Like before I even set a boundary, I want to know, what am I protecting here? And why is it
Mhm.
important? And so if you're protecting your sobriety, like obviously that's a huge value. But then I would think about all the granular things, like why are you wanting to be sober? So really get granular with
Yeah.
it. So then when you feel the guilt, you go back to your why. And then you say, okay, but
Mhm.
yeah, I feel this momentarily, but even the relationship will benefit from this no long term if I stay sober.
That makes sense. Okay. So I wanna switch a little bit to emotional immaturity. What what are the hallmarks of emotional immaturity? How do you know that someone is emotionally immature? And I ask this because it relates to boundary setting, right? If someone can't respect your boundary or has a pretty big reaction to your boundary, it might indicate that they're emotionally immature.
Yes, absolutely. So if somebody reacts poorly to your boundary, sometimes they can be neurotypical and they don't like change. So it's not always emotional immaturity. But if they kind of have there's a lot of hallmark signs. Like if you read Lindsay Gibson's Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents, she's got a bunch of
Love that
them.
book.
Oh, it's so
Mhm.
good. That was just like a game
So
changer for
good. Yes. Me too. Me too. So good, that
Oh,
book.
but like for me, it's like this perpetual, like their vernacular is pointed inwards and it's all about me all the time. So your boundary, how it impacts me. So like we're going to keep the wedding list really short, or maybe we're not going to have alcohol at my wedding. We're not going to have alcohol at our wedding. And then your mom is just like, oh my gosh, like, what am I going to do? Like, I have to have my, whatever her favorite drink is. Like, she doesn't even
Mhm.
consider your sobriety or why you're not having alcohol. She makes it all about
Right.
her. There
Mhm.
is this inability to take accountability. No matter how you frame it, how gentle you put it, it's like they can't take accountability. They just completely
Right.
deflect it back onto you immediately. Another hallmark sign is their feelings rule their world. So if they feel like you are pushing them away with their boundaries or rejecting them or making them feel a certain way, that's how they're going to respond to you. And so that can be really big and defensive and ugly, or it can be sulking, crying, and ghosting you for days.
Mhm. Well, I know a few people like that in my life. Anyone
Same.
else? Anyone else out there? Yeah.
So just how do we identify if we're lacking some emotional maturity, and then how do we develop it? Like how can is that something you can change?
I think I think it's important to remember we all have moments of emotional immaturity, like when we are hangry and our kids are spazzing in the back seat and we're on like the last run of a road trip. Like you could quickly snap and say some things that are pretty ugly and not be mature in that moment. Like a lot of people will have moments of just not being our best selves and being immature, but that is not a pattern. So if you have a pattern of always showing up like this, that's emotional immaturity. And typically people who are emotionally immature, they lack the insight to even think about it or ask
Mhm.
that question.
Yeah.
They're not thinking like, I wonder how I can get more mature. Like they don't see anything wrong with themselves. Like they're not asking those questions.
I I have this example where I have clients who will come into my office and be like, "Am I a narcissist?" And I'm like, you're asking, so probably not."
Same. I know I do the same thing.
I'm like, if you're saying those words and you're doing like a deep dive on Google, I'm like, then you're not. So I guess it's the same around emotional maturity.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So are emotional maturity and accountability the same thing? Are they interlinked?
Well, I think it takes a lot of maturity and confidence to take accountability. Yeah, I do. I do.
Agreed. Yeah. I love accountability. Can I just say that right now? I
Mhm.
love it. I love when people take accountability. Like from the server who makes a mistake to like I like it when I do it now. It makes me feel
Mhm.
good. Like I'm just going to take accountability for this mistake I made.
I
Mhm.
don't know. I think sometimes though, is there like a toxic level of accountability? Like I think sometimes the amends, everyone knows I feel this way about the amends step in AA, that I think that it almost takes accountability too far. It's like I'm gonna take responsibility for everything negative that's happened in our relationship. Do you know what I mean? I've brought it up like maybe like 10 times so far on the
But
podcast.
but they're taking accountability for their part in the negative relationship,
When I
not the
tell
whole
you,
negative relationship. It's their part.
this comes from a very specific example, which is when my brother got sober, he did his amends to my parents. And I was like, you asshole. You just told them they were like great parents and they didn't do anything wrong. Like you took
Mhm.
accountability for everything that happened. And so that is my specific example. I was so mad at him when he did his amends to them. I was like, now you're making me look crazy. Because you're like, "Oh, you're such great people. You know, I can't believe I've treated you so badly." And I was like, I
Mhm.
can't come on, dude. Come on."
So, okay, let's ask the question. Is there too much? Can you have take too much accountability?
Well, I mean, if it's not yours, I think just ownership of your actions is good enough. But I would say if you dip into like people pleasing mode and you're saying sorry for everything,
Uh-huh.
even though it's like completely out of your control, yeah, I think that that's a
Yes.
little. I think we can all say that's too
Yeah.
far.
Yeah, for sure. I see that a lot too. Like, because I see obviously I'm a relationship therapist, so I see a lot of couples. I see that like one person taking accountability for everything in the relationship. And it's like, no, what is your part? What can you own?
Mhm.
Yeah. What are some exercises that we can use to build that emotional maturity muscle? And so that it doesn't get like too big where we're taking accountability for like everything that's ever happened, but where we can learn to self-reflect if it's something that's not necessarily natural. Like if we're kind of naturally defensive or, what are some ways we can work on that?
I think if you're naturally defensive, a good thing to do is to start purposely like reflecting, whether you're out in nature, going for a walk, or journaling, whatever, or even just doing voice notes if you're an out loud processor. Just kind of talk about, like, okay, what are the insecurities that I have? And when people like you're defensive because it's getting too close to that insecurity. And is there any work I can do around that insecurity so I'm not so defensive?
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's a big one. I think that's a big one for sure. And I also appreciate that you are looking like at the whole person. So like if their defensive usually is like defensiveness can be like a nervous system, right? Response as well.
Mhm.
So what you're saying is like get out in nature, what's going on here, like being able to calm your nervous system down and to be able to have like more space between the response, right?
Yep, yep, and then that also creating that space helps when you're journaling because you have that one step removed, and if you voice note it and then listen back, again, it's just one step removed because then you're listening to yourself.
Mhm. Yeah. Love that one step removed. That's really great. Well, Jess, thank you so much for being with us today on Sisters in Sobriety. It was a pleasure to have you here and talk about boundaries.
Thank you so much for having me. If you guys want, I made just like a printout that your listeners can print out. It's just like a Google form. So I can send you a link and it just lays out like 13 different scenarios where they would need to set a boundary around sobriety. So like you talked about a friend inviting you to a bar, like a drinking buddy saying like what's one drink, family members offering you drinks, handling like a high conflict family member, all that stuff. And then I just plugged it into the way I communicate boundaries, like in my script formula. So then they can just kind of see how it can be very kind. And they can also see that a boundary is your like action that you can control. It's not having to change or control the other person.
I love that. I think that's going to be so useful for our listeners.
Our episodes come out Monday and Tuesday. We release an exercise related to the episode. So that'll be our exercise
Oh,
and I
that's
think that's so
cool.
helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, amazing. Well, thank you so much, Jess. And
Yeah.
thank you all for listening to Sisters in Sobriety. And we will see you next week.
Thank you.
This was Sisters in Sobriety.
Thank you for listening and being with us today.
If you want to learn more about sobriety and meet your community, find us at sistersinsobriety.substack.com.
Are you a sister in sobriety? Then reach out on social media. We'd love to hear from you.
If you're feeling generous, leave us 5 stars and a review and follow us wherever you listen.
You'll never miss an episode. Until next time.